his proposal and even said that it could rightly be called, in his opinion, the Reagan rule.
That wild-eyed socialist tax-hiking class warrior was Ronald Reagan. He thought that in America, the wealthiest should pay their fair share, and he said so.
Now, with that, Republicans pushing back and pushing back hard. Rush Limbaugh saying the president's got this all wrong.
So now we find out today that not only was Ronald Reagan for tax increases on the rich, Ronald Reagan was pro-abortion. Have you ever stopped to realize this bunch of people, the Democrat Party, Barack Obama, they hate Reagan. They have always hated Reagan. They engage in revisionist history about the Reagan years.
And it went on from there, and it does not end there either. Much more on this and from Rush Limbaugh coming up a bit later in the hour.
They all know that trickle-down economics works. They all know that Reaganomics works. That's why they're invoking it. They all know that tax cuts work, and that's why they oppose it. Because what's good for America is bad for them and their political party.
So President Obama invoking the name of Ronald Reagan while trying to pitch a so-called Buffett rule. That rule would set a minimum tax rate of 30% for people who earn at least $1 million a year on investment income. And Mr. Obama says Reagan would have supported that.
I'm not the first president to call for this idea that everybody's got to do their fair share. If it'll help convince folks in Congress to make the right choice, we could call it the Reagan rule instead of the Buffett rule.
Conservatives jumped all over that, take serious issue with that comment. Here's the radio host Rush Limbaugh shortly after.
They engage in revisionist history about the Reagan years, but all of it when they need to move their agenda forward, when they need to marshal support for what they're trying to do, who do they invoke? LBJ? No. Teddy Kennedy? No. JFK? No. RFK? No. Bill Clinton? No. They invoke Ronald Reagan, the beloved Ronaldus Magnus.
Truth to that, Christopher Hahn, former aide to New York Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer. Also a Fox News contributor, Michael Graham's a radio talk show host out of Boston. Michael and Chris, good morning to both of you.
Great to be here.
Where are we on this, Michael?
Well, I just love watching President Obama, a guy who spent his entire political career desperately trying to raise taxes on people, declaring himself the Reagan guy. I mean, excuse me, listen, you want to raise tax rates on people, and you're comparing yourself to a guy who took the top tax rate from 70% down to 28%, and that makes you Reagan. So I assume then that Obamacare will now be known as Reagan Care. Show me the connection here, Chris. I don't get it.
Mike, I think Republicans forget that Reagan had one of the biggest tax increases in the history of the United States just 6 months after he had his first big tax cuts in 1981. Reagan came in as a guy who believed in trickle-down economics, but he quickly learned that that just created deficits in our federal government, and he had to stop it. Now, I see Rush out there, and I see other conservatives. I think they're a little self-loathing when it comes to Reagan. They forget about Reagan's past. I mean, they blame Obama for things, but Reagan really did say we should have some fairness in our tax code.
Limbaugh's bigger point was not to be distracted from the daily back and forth. His bigger point was the focus which should be on Barack Obama and what he considers his dismal record of economic failure. That was the larger point he was making. On taxes, however, gentlemen, here is what we have, okay? The top 1% of Americans paid 36.7% of total federal personal income tax. The top 10% paid almost 71% of the total personal income tax in the year 2009. Those are your taxpayers, Michael.
Chris is going to try to tell you that they controlled more than that amount of income, which is an absolute lie. They earned about half that amount of the income.
True.
But there's another lie here, too. Look. Here's the deal. When Ronald Reagan left office, taxes were lower and revenues were higher than when he took office. When Barack Obama leaves office, if he gets his way, taxes will be significantly higher. That's the bottom line. And to compare himself to Reagan is nonsense.
You know, what Barack Obama is trying to do is bring us back to the Clinton level of taxation, which worked pretty well for this country.
Which is higher.
No, yeah, it's higher. It's 0.3% of the marginal rate, which makes him a socialist.
Yeah, pointed question, Chris. When President Obama talks about Ronald Reagan, does it work?
Absolutely.
How?
It points out that Republicans used to be people who would negotiate. Republicans used to be people who were compromised. Republicans used to be people who didn't think that Hollywood was the enemy. In fact, they elected a movie star president of the United States. So I don't understand where Republicans go. I don't know what Rush is. I think Rush is really a closeted liberal. I think in his heart of hearts, he understands that Reagan today would not be a Republican, and it eats at him.
That would be a major headline if he came on the show and did that today,
Look,
that conversion. Michael, I'll give you the last word.
Well, I mean, if you believe that Rush is a closet liberal, then you can believe that Barack Obama is Ronald Reagan, and you can believe that, you know, Michael Graham is the new George Clooney. You can believe all kinds of things if you can believe that.
Well, you're closer to Clooney than I am, but I do believe that Ronald Reagan is closer to Obama than he is to the current crop of Republicans. I believe that.
Thanks to both of you. We'll get the split screen of Clooney queued up for both of you next week.
Oh,
thank you,
no,
Michael.
Please.
Thank you,
Spare
Chris.
your viewers.
20 minutes past.